bit of time in Ecclesiastes. And I kind of feel like you guys know me, my sense of humor can be quite sarcastic. Yes, very much so. And so when I read Ecclesiastes, there are times where if you have been a Christian that has gone through a trial, it stands out as, oh, how relevant it is. And then you go through verses of hardship, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get a tidbit of hope. So we're going to kind of go through Ecclesiastes this morning. What's this, Vicky? So he explains that, and we might cover some of that this morning. So most people believe that Solomon was kind of an old guy when he wrote the book. Yep, and he looks back, and it's not reminiscing. There's a hint of regret at a few places, but there's a hint of I'm going to test the boundaries of wisdom. And so that's where we're going to jump off, and we're going to start off. And you can see this as the opening verses of this morning's message. Absolutely futile, says the teacher. Absolutely futile. Everything is futile. What does a man gain for all of his efforts and he labors under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, painting it, it returns to its place where it rises, gusting to the south, turning to the north, turning, turning goes the wind. And the wind returns in its cycles. The streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. I, the teacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to seek and explore through wisdom all that is done under heaven. God has given people this miserable task to keep them occupied. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun and have found everything to be futile. The pursuit of the wind. And as we read this opening passage, there sounds to be no optimism in the man's voice. He is just like a windbag. You know? He sounds like, nothing I do matters. And then he's like, and then he says, it's like chasing the wind. Of course, in the United States, we don't talk about chasing the wind. We talk about a dog's chase its tail. I kind of feel like this is relevant for this morning with our 80-mile-an-hour winds that just went through. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have massed wisdom far beyond all of those who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. I applied my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly. Those are the opposites, apparently. I've learned that this too is pursuant of the wind. For much wisdom is much sorrow. As knowledge increases, grief increases. Now, you and I, as we gain experience, as we go through life, we find that there are ups and there are downs, and we find that there are times where we can be in despair over our hardship, where we are upset that we don't have it better. And it seems the older we get, the easier it is for us to relate to this. I said to myself, go ahead, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy what is good. But it turned out to be futile. I said about laughter, it is madness. And about pleasure, what does this accomplish? I explore with my mind how to let my body enjoy life with wine and how to grasp folly. My mind still guided me with wisdom until I could see what good for people to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. Now, everybody in this room, including Ben, can attest to how fast time goes by. Now, some of you can remember how fast time goes by, right? How many of you realize the last time my grandkids were here in church? It's been almost 2 years. But in my memory, it wasn't long ago. It wasn't. And as we are preparing for them to return to us 2 years afterwards, our excitement is plentiful. But here we are, Solomon is saying life is but just a few days. And again, we can relate to that synopsis of time. I used to think my grandmother was so dumb when she would say time flies. And I, as a 10-year-old boy, would say, Grandma, time doesn't change. It's the same for everybody. There's 60 seconds in every minute. There's 60 minutes in every hour. It doesn't fly. It's steady. Now that I'm this age, I understand the math behind my grandmother's saying. And I understand the wisdom behind it. How many of you want to hear the wisdom of Grandma? All right. Mike, how old are you? You're 60. All right. So when you were 50, 1 year of every year that you lived is less than 1 year at 60. And 1 year when you're 10 is 10% of your life. But 1 year when you're 50 is 2% of your life. And so time travels over that lifespan differently. The older you get, you have more to work with in that vessel. And so time moves faster the older you get. It makes sense now. It didn't make sense at 10 years old. It sounded like folly, not wisdom. Verse 4, I increased my achievement. Now, Fred, pay close attention to this passage. I built houses. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself. I planted every kind of fruit tree in them. I constructed reservoirs of water for myself from which to irrigate the grove to flourishing trees. I acquired male and female servants. I had slaves who were born in my house. I also owned many herds of cattle and flocks. more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. I amassed silver and gold for myself, and treasures of kings and provinces. I gathered male and female singers for myself, many concubines, delights of men. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also remained with me. All that my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not refuse myself any pleasure. I took pleasure in all of my struggles. This was my reward for all my struggles. He almost boasts about his accomplishment. He almost boasts that he has been able to enjoy life to the fullest and accomplish many things. And he's like, I got it all. But he doesn't sound happy. He doesn't sound like he is content with his situation. Next slide, please. Somebody's not there. Here we go. When I considered all that I had accomplished and what I had labored to achieve, I found everything to be futile and the pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. I turned to consider wisdom, madness, and folly. For what will the man be like who comes after the king? Here, this is interesting now. He will do whatever has already been done, and I realize that there is an advantage to wisdom over folly, like the advantage of light over darkness. Now that's kind of a strong statement. Wisdom is like light, folly is like darkness. I think most of us can understand that. The wise man has eyes in his head, but the foolish walks in darkness. Yet I also knew that one fate comes to them both. The wise and the foolish both end the same. As we read through this, we glean more sarcasm, more searching. I hated all my work, and I labored under the sun, because I must leave it to a man who comes after me. Now this is interesting. And who knows whether he'll be a wise man or a fool. Yet he will take over my work that I have labored at skillfully under the sun. This too is futile. So I began to give myself over to despair concerning my work that I labored under the sun. When there is a man whose work was done with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, he must give his portion to a man who has not worked for it. This too is futile and a great wrong. What does a man get for all his work and all of his effort that he labors under the sun? All his days are filled with grief, and is occupied is sorrowful. Even at night his mind does not rest. This too is futile. Now, as I read through this, I connect to this story as if you go and let's say you're going to give a gift to somebody. And you are wanting to give a gift of precious nature, a family heirloom. And you go and you give that gift as a family heirloom to them. And they look at it and it's not a family heirloom to them. And they see it as something else. What does your brain say? Your brain says, oh. Matter of fact, it's sometimes if you give a family heirloom to somebody before they're ready, you're afraid that that family heirloom is going to end up at the pawn shop. Can you imagine if you had inherited, the family silverware, and you have this precious item, the silverware that has been in your family for generations, and you take the silverware into the pawn shop and it's worth $118.32 in silver, and they cash it out, and you've lost generations of history of people that have sat down together, family after family, generation after generation, and shared meals with that silverware. Somebody is going to be hurt, and somebody's going to have $118 and not realize that they cost the price of their heritage. So you understand this. When you worry about what's going to come and the person after you doesn't hold the same value as you hold, and if you work hard to get something and you want to give it to somebody, you want them to appreciate the gift. But sometimes you've given a gift that you worked hard for to give that gift, and they received it as something you did not work hard for, or they didn't value that as much as you value. You give it to them with the idea that they're going to keep it in good shape, and they don't. Or you give it to them with the idea that they're going to appreciate it, and it's not even in their possession in a little ways longer. You understand the futility of this passage. You embrace the examples here. Spacebar, please. Here we go. There is nothing better for a man to eat and drink and enjoy his work. I have seen that even this is from God's hand, because he can eat and enjoy life apart from him. For to the man who pleases his sight, he gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and accumulating in order to give to the one who pleases God's sight. This too is futile and in pursuant of the wind. So here we have a glimpse. We finally get closer to the end of chapter 2, and there is something godly in this passage, something that shifts their logic from sarcasm to appreciation. He says, there's nothing better for a man to eat and drink and enjoy his work. Now, a moment ago he said, I built all kinds of stuff and didn't have fulfillment. I accomplished more than anybody in Jerusalem, but yet it is all futile. I worry about what's going to come after me, and that's futile. But yet here he goes. He says, isn't good. It is good to enjoy your work. It is good for you to eat and drink. And I have seen that even this is from God's hand. Because who can eat and who can enjoy life apart from him? So he's connecting the simple pleasures of life that he discarded as futile. But to the sinner, he gives a task of gathering and accumulating in order to give to the one who is pleasing in God's sight. This too is futile and in pursuant of the wind. There is an occasion for everything, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to give birth, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to uproot. I think that's the weed, as Vicky said earlier. A time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to throw stones, a time to gather stones, I guess on the farm, there's always time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to avoid embracing. A time to search. A time to count as lost. Now, this is one of those things that my wife and I are very different on. If I can't find it in 7 seconds, I'm done looking. I count it as lost. She could spend 7 days to find it, and she counted has found, and I've counted it lost after 7 seconds. So this is a different value for her than it is for me. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. We recognize all of these, and we see them in different lights as we see that example. And we close out this section of part 1 of our sermon series. What does the worker gain from his struggle? I've seen a task that God has given people to accompany or keep them occupied. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has put eternity in their hearts. But man cannot discover the work of God has done from the beginning to the end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life. It is also the gift of God, and everyone who eats, drinks, and enjoys all of his efforts, I know that all God does will last forever. There will be adding to it and taking from it. It works so that the people will be aware to be in awe of him. 22a, for I have seen that there's nothing better than for a person to enjoy his activities because of his reward. You know, we walk through this world. We are occupiers. And we are occupiers until Jesus comes to take us home. Some of us are waiting for the sky to open up and him to call to us. Or we're waiting until death calls to us. Either way, we are looking for eternity, not the temporal. So while you occupy it till he comes, life is intended to be enjoyed. Even though there are many places to be full of sarcasm. Many places where you scratch your head and say, this feels futile. Yeah. And whether you're stuck in the mud every spring or you're collecting one too many rocks, there's a time to collect rocks and a time to be stuck in the mud. But enjoy the simple things of life. Enjoy what God has given you before you. Let's stand and close in prayer.